Good morning. You've reached Gloria with Homestead Talk, and I am here today with Michael and Schikoy, and they're from the Sacred Circle Homestead, and they are representing their state of Vermont on this homesteading interview today. So welcome, guys, and thank you for joining me today.
Thanks so much for having us.
Yeah. So would you like to share with the audience where they can find you on social media?
Yeah, we're on Instagram at Sacred Circle Homestead, no spaces or anything. At YouTube, Sacred Circle Homestead, and Facebook as well. We just started a Facebook page, finally. So that's just at Sacred Circle Homestead as well.
Okay. And do you have a website also that you want to share?
We do have a website. That's www.sacredcirclehomestead.org.
Great. Okay. So let's go ahead and get started. If you would share a little bit about where you currently reside, what is the population and the culture of your community?
Okay, we live in Vermont, Bristol at the moment. We're soon to be moving to Woodbury. Very small population here in Bristol, in Vermont in general. What would you say it is about?
I think there's about 600,000 residents in Vermont, and here in Bristol there's only about 3,000 residents, maybe just under 4,000. It's a pretty small town. Here where we are in Vermont right now, there's a lot of dairy farms, so it's a pretty rural community. And where we're moving to now in the spring, it's even more rural. There's about 700 residents there, and there's a lot of dairy farms up there too. But there's also a big resurgence of organic agriculture.
Regenerative agriculture.
I think Vermont has the most farmers markets per square mile and the most organic farms per square mile. In terms of per capita or something like that, I think.
Nice. So how did you get to where you live today? And share a little bit about, you had told me before that you were participating in a work trade experience. So go ahead and share a little bit about that.
All right.
So we wanted to live closer to the land and have the freedom to garden and whatnot. So we put up an ad on Craigslist and we asked if anybody out there had some land they're willing to do a work trade for. We cut their wood or we grow them food, and somebody reached out. So we've been here for 3 years, and we're just outgrowing our homestead now and ready to expand. We want more we want some goats, and we want to just expand with that.
Yeah, when we got here, as you can see, we're in a yurt right now. So this yurt isn't ours, but this is where we're living as part of that work trade. And it's been a good arrangement for the past 3 years because it enabled us to save up enough money to buy land debt free. So if there's any young folks out there who don't have the money right away to go from the environment that they're in to the environment that they want to be in, then this is an excellent transition strategy.
Definitely. And it gives you experience, so you can kind of jump into something and know what you really, really like, whether it's gardening or maybe you want to get into animals or beekeeping.
Right, like our first season here as a work trade, there were no gardens here or anything, so we had to build the gardens. And
we have really bad clay soil, so it taught us how to build up soil and how to use regenerative skills with holding water and not having erosion, things like that.
So it helped, so it kind of helped us not so much make the mistakes that we would have made our first year owning land, but it helped us kind of refine our strategies. So now that we have this first season at our land in the spring, we will know more or less what we're going to do. Obviously it's going to be different because there's different land, different soils, but we have that experience behind us now, which is good.
Sure. So tell me a little bit about actually living in that yurt and what it's been like compared to traditional living in like an apartment or a home.
It's a great experience. We're really close with the seasons, in winter it's cold, in summer it's hot, in spring it's muddy here in Vermont, and in winter, like I said, it's pretty cold and we have a wood stove.
Yeah, temperatures this is a 30-foot yurt, so it's pretty big. It's 30 feet from end to end. So the temperatures can oscillate pretty quickly. So in the summer, oftentimes it's too hot in here. In the winter, oftentimes it's too cold in here. We wake up in the morning sometimes and it's 20 degrees inside.
They allowed us to put a wood stove in. We found one ourselves and it's behind us. So that'll come with us.
Is there insulation
So
in
for
the
yurts,
yurts?
yeah.
Like,
So for yurts, this is a manufactured yurt. People build their own and they add like wool insulation. But for the manufactured yurts, they have supposedly it's the insulation that NASA astronauts use. I don't see how that's possible because
It's cold.
it doesn't work. But basically what it is just like a layer of bubble wrap sandwiched between two tinfoil pieces of layer. So that's kind of behind this white background that you see here. It's just a very thin layer of insulation. I guess it's supposed to be more reflective insulation than thermal insulation.
I
But
see.
needless to say, it doesn't really work that great. So
I wouldn't recommend it for somebody really long term. I mean, yurts, I feel like, a lot of people will say that they can end up, building up mold and stuff. And that we do see that. And that's another reason we really want to just build our own cabin and, warm ourselves and make sure whatever we put into our cabin is our mistake if it doesn't work. And
that's not to say that yurts aren't a good strategy for a temporary shelter.
No, it definitely is.
We have friends a couple miles down the road who live in a 20-foot yurt while they're building their cordwood home, and their yurt, they put it up themselves, so they knew that they were going to be living in it, so they did all the right things to make it where it's tighter, it's a lot warmer in the winter.
A lot warmer.
So they, whereas this one was put up in kind of a rush, they had to live here while they built their house. So they kind of just threw it all together, and there's a lot of air gaps and stuff like that.
So if you do it right, it works out. If you don't, it's not a long-term thing.
Right.
Okay. So you said you're moving to a new parcel of land, that the experience with the work trade has given you the opportunity to purchase this land, save up that money and purchase it, being debt-free. Share where that land is in approximate to where you are now, and what are your future plans for that land?
Okay.
So the new land is in Woodbury, Vermont. That's about an hour and 45 minutes northeast of us. So we got to go over a couple of mountains to get there. We got 12 and a quarter acres, and we got it for an incredible deal. There's a well and a septic already on it. We got that for $12,500. So that's way under the average land price in Vermont. So I think we lucked out. We found the right seller who he was really eager to sell.
And we put an ad on Craigslist yet again, and we just were, we put our story, what we're looking for, and even when we were searching for land, we just would ask local. That's like your best bet, because usually when you go through an app like Zillow or something, you have to pay the real estate agent, and that is where a big chunk of money comes from. So we wanted to have a real connection with the person we were getting the land from. And it's great, the person we bought it from, he was happy for us to steward the land, and we'd send text messages back and forth. So it's more of a relationship than it is just a money deal.
And not to mention, there was a lot of aspects about the land that made it so it wasn't valuable to the average buyer, but it was valuable to us.
Yeah.
So, for example, it's a mile and a half down an unmaintained road. So the town,
dirt road.
yeah, the town owns the road, but they don't plow it, they don't maintain it. It's a one-lane kind of road. It was pretty, I wouldn't say heavily logged, but it was logged. And also probably about a third of the land is wet. So that's okay with us because we share habitat with beavers, moose. It's a cedar swamp, which is a really cool,
gorgeous to look at.
Really unique habitat. Yeah. So there are things that made it attractive to us, but wouldn't make it necessarily attractive to, say, somebody wanting to, build a condo or whatever.
Right.
So.
And we'll get into that in a little bit here about why that habitat is going to be a necessity to you, and why it's beneficial to you.
Right.
Tell me about the skills that you needed to learn to become a successful homesteader.
Number one for us was food preservation and gardening. And gardening in a way where it wasn't just annual agriculture, it was more perennial things that, because you want your tomatoes, you want your peppers, you want your usual things, but sometimes you don't have enough space in your mind or in your time schedule to plant everything you want. So we really focused on perennials, putting up our food, canning, pressure canning. For a while, we're kind of deterred by pressure canning because they talk about botulism and it kind of scares you, but once you start going, it's kind of addicting. You want to can everything.
So how did you actually learn those skills?
A little bit of research, because there's a huge homesteading community on, obviously you supporting it. Instagram, there's great people to follow. There's YouTube videos.
Yeah, the internet is a great resource to just be able to mull through. And I mean, granted, there's a lot of misinformation on the internet, so you have to cross-reference a couple times. We also have a bunch of old books from the 60s and 70s, and before that, things like the Nearings. And
back to land movements, things where before they had the internet, where the knowledge had to be right for the right person, so you can trust it. And then always you put your own twist on things.
Right, and
everybody
also
has a unique way of doing it.
Trial and error is a big way of learning. Doing something and messing up and failing and saying, oh, well, next time I know to do this or not to do this. And that kind of goes hand in hand with some of the skills that we had to have. Things like firewood. Our first season here, burning firewood, we had way less than we thought we needed. And it wasn't the right wood to burn. So
we ended up cutting down standing dead wood and hauling it up our snowy ravines to be warm. So we're warming ourselves twice, and it worked out, but not something you want to do in the middle of winter.
And problem solving.
Yeah, it's all trial and error, isn't it?
Right, yeah. Problem solving skills is a big thing when it comes to homesteading in general, I think. If you're out there and you're stuck doing something and something doesn't go to plan, you have to have the skills to think on the fly and figure out what to do for yourself, because you can't always just ask Google or whatever search engine you use. I mean, sometimes you can, and that works great, but
like not too long ago, we got stuck on the side of the road, and that's when community here in Vermont came in handy. We were stuck. We didn't know what to do. We couldn't go forward. We couldn't go backwards. We were sliding off kind of a hill, and somebody drove by with some chains and a nice truck. And all you have to say is, hey, can you pull us out? Nods his head. Yep. Does it. Pulls us out, and it's where a great community comes in.
Right.
So having that relationship with people too.
Yeah, and it really sounds like that's been key in your efforts to start homesteading is local community. I mean, just by you reaching out to people on Craigslist and networking with these people that are local, you've gotten so many opportunities. And I think that's such a key bit of advice to new people who may be on the fence about homesteading is reach out and do as much as you can locally.
Right.
And a lot of people think, self-sufficient, it's kind of impossible to be completely self-sufficient. You have to have people you can rely on every once in a while. And there's no shame in that. You need friends. That's what makes humans human.
I think going back to some of the skills for homesteading, I think codependence is a very integral part of homesteading, because independence doesn't really work. I don't think it's ever really been a thing. Humans we're all social creatures, so we need folks to depend on sometimes. And as long as you can reciprocate that, as long as they can depend on you, then it tends to work out really great.
Trust is key. Exactly.
That's what we have community for. So.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about your business. I know you folks started a business, and you said to me the other day that you think that you're becoming very successful. And I said, how do you know that you're becoming successful if it's not in a monetary way? So go ahead and share with the audience what your experience in starting this business was, and why you think in your heart that you've become successful.
Well, where to start?
I know that's a lot.
First,
it's a great question.
First, we can just share what our business is. So we own and operate a small scale perennial permaculture nursery. So we focus mainly on medicinal and edible species, things like fruit trees, nut trees, berry bushes,
herbaceous plants,
medicinal herbs and things like that. So we have a lot of fun working with plants and propagating them, and we sell them locally, and we also in the spring and in the fall we ship them bare root.
So that's what you can find on our website. And we're always adding plants. The relationship with plants are never ending. You always find something new, and you learn something new as the climate's changing. Plants are changing, plants are adapting, and we're adapting. So it's kind of a reciprocal relationship together. You're learning together.
And in terms of success, I mean, once we started making reliable sales in the spring and in the fall online, that was basically success to us. And we live a pretty minimal, frugal lifestyle. So we didn't need a bunch of money, say to buy, to take out a mortgage and to pay interest every month. And So we knew we needed a minimal amount of money, and we haven't had a 9-to-5 job in 4 years.
Maybe more, 5.
Yeah, I mean, we do odd jobs around the community, but our main source of income we like to try to have as our business, as Sacred Circle Homestead.
And sometimes we design people's garden. We're always working with plants, and we're always outside because that's our passion. I think the main thing for success for us is doing what makes us happy, because then it makes you want to do it. It's not a drag. You don't wake up and say, oh, I have to do this. It's I get to do this. I want to do this. So having the passion behind your work, it is what's going to push you. If you're not, we wouldn't go have a cell phone business because we don't know stuff about cell phones.
We're not passionate about that.
Yeah.
So to us, success is, pursuing what we're passionate about, making a little bit of money, of course, but also as long as we and our customers are happy and there's some exchange going on there, then I think that's success to us.
And we're helping the planet, and that was a big thing for us. We feel that perennials and fruit trees is a way to make people self-sufficient and be able to rely on a food that's always going to be giving. Of course, the first couple years, sometimes it takes a little, but after that, it's a gift that just keeps giving.
And it helps us and it helps the planet. So, planting an orchard of apple trees or whatever trees, for example, that's not only giving you a gift, but it's also constantly preventing erosion, sequestering carbon, providing habitat for animals, all these things that not only directly benefit the human, but also directly benefit
the earth and
our environments too.
Beautiful. Love what you guys are doing. You want to share a little bit about the products that I know you said that you sell plants and trees. You want to just share a little bit about the types of products that you sell?
Yeah, some native trees like pawpaws and persimmons. This year we'll be adding black walnuts and butternuts. We have currants and
chestnuts, hazelnuts. We sell, things like Jerusalem artichokes or sunchokes.
We also sell herbal products like tinctures, because in winter we collect the plants to make medicine for people. So tinctures, herbal teas are a big thing we like to make.
Salves, things like that. We're just getting our herbal goods apothecary page kind of established after a season of plant propagation. So we're really trying to kind of ride 2 horses at once, do the plants in their live form, but also in their dried herb form. So that can help us when we're not shipping plants in the summer and in the winter.
Very smart.
Yeah,
very, very smart. Tell me about how you learned about the business end of things.
To be honest, we jumped into it. We
both of our fathers have owned businesses at one point in their life, so we picked up little things here and there.
Whether it's something you don't want to do or it's something you do want to do.
Right. And then we just kind of jumped into it, and
we kind of worked it out. I mean, there's legal parts of it. You gotta, register your business. For us, we need to have a nursery license. So you just kind of look at those things. Try to always make sure you do it legally, because you don't want your business taken out from under your feet because you just missed something you didn't know. And also, we knew that you don't want to go in debt, so don't spend more than you can make. And for us, we don't really spend much because our plants are here. We either bought them or
propagate them from the wild, or or
traded with friends.
Right.
And just kind of paying attention to your expenses. And
I mean, one of the best pieces of advice I can give for anybody wanting to start a business is just start small. Don't overwhelm yourself with everything because there's a lot that can go on. There's a lot that can go wrong and there's a lot that can go right, but just start small. Start at a manageable scale.
What you can handle, whether it's handwriting flyers or printing out flyers at your library. We started just printing out some flyers and saying we have plants, and then we were like, oh, well, we can start a website. Michael was really good at that part. I'm not very good with computers, and he makes that up. Yeah. And he did great on the website. And then after that, we're like, well, this is a great way to reach more than just our small community. Mm-hmm. So then
of course, we should probably add to that every state has its own rules and regulations and governing bodies.
Absolutely.
So
we can't ship certain plants to certain states, so we always have to make sure we're paying attention. And we can't ship currants to, I think it's Maine, and there's
a couple other states.
Yeah, a couple other states, but we always make sure we pay attention to that.
Okay, so let's go ahead and switch hats a little bit. And we were talking earlier about the habitat of your new land and actually in the forestation where you're currently living. And one of the big things that you folks do is forage. And I'm really interested in this, and I think that you can share a lot of valuable information with our viewers. So let's talk a little bit about foraging, what it is, what you have in your environment currently.
Okay.
And how that can benefit people by foraging in their own areas.
Yeah.
All right. So the first thing is never eat anything you don't know what it is. Make sure you know, especially with mushrooms.
Make sure you know 1,000%. You know, have a field guide with you, a book, or somebody who's knowledgeable about the area,
or have done your research. I mean, there's obvious things we all know, like dandelion, certain berries, rose hips. But personally, eating from the wild, it's great for your body. It's great for your stomach. It's great for your relationship with nature in general. It really connects you on a whole different level.
Not only spiritual energy level, but also a biochemical level. You know, there's bacteria on these wild foods that our DNA and our
body needs.
Our body knows and our body needs, because all of our ancestors have eaten these foods. Mm-hmm. So the more wild food that one person eats, the more of a I don't want to say instinct, but you know, the more of a
relationship.
Right,
it's
the
a
more
natural
of a relationship you can develop. Yeah.
On our property, we have a lot of mushrooms. It's really moist. We have what's the moss? I can't think of it right now.
Usnea.
Usnea. It's really, it's a moss that grows on trees. It grows really slow, so don't pick it all the time.
We take that from branches that have fallen on the ground.
Yeah.
We have
wild hazels, actually, we're pretty stoked about.
Wild hazelnuts, which is really cool. In our area in the Northeast, we have people are always like, oh, can you grow nuts in the Northeast?
We have so many nut trees.
Yeah, nut trees are a really safe thing to start to forage. Now, because not only can you begin to identify trees and figure out what tree is what, but the nut that falls from the tree, I mean, you can't really go wrong. There's going to be some that taste like
acorns. You know, there's a lot of tannins. You want to soak those.
Yeah.
My people used to soak them in a river for days, and then you take them out, you roast them, turn them into a flour, or you eat them how they are. The black walnuts, butternuts grow here like crazy.
There's a lot, obvious where we are now. I mean, at the property that we're moving to, since it's been logged pretty heavily 3 or 4 years before, something that grows back in those open areas is raspberry and blackberry brambles.
Pioneer species.
So those are a really good beginner forage plant, because you can't really, I don't think there are really any other berries that look like a raspberry or a blackberry that are poisonous.
Mm-hmm. And then we have herbaceous things like mullein, which is medicine for us. We can make tinctures, and there's mullein and red clover and plants that we haven't even yet to identify, which is great. We're still learning them.
Yeah, go to a local bookstore or a library and just take out if they have
local
plants of the Northeast or wherever you are, plants of the wherever bioregion you are, and even if they're not edible, it's helpful to
identify the non-edible ones, because when you know the non-edible ones, the edible ones are more prevalent.
Right. Yeah. It's just good to get to know your environment.
Mm-hmm.
I think that it's a kind of a scary place for people to go. I have actually done herb walks with herbalists. I have read books on edibles and nature, and I still find a place of fear when I go out looking, because I don't have the experience,
right. And I think fear is a big part of it. When all of our ancestors lived with the earth and in the wild, we were never afraid of our environment, not only because we knew it, but also because we're constantly trying to communicate with these plants and with the beings that we're surrounded with. Mm-hmm. So sometimes if you look at a plant, it's going to tell you it's not safe to eat, whether it's by the colors, the overall characteristics and behavior.
It's called the doctrine of signature. So when you look at a certain plant, say raspberry leaf, if you look at it, there's a kind of like a triangle, and that kind of shows the shape of a woman's uterus. And that actually is key for menstrual cramps or, helping women balance their hormones. So looking at a plant and kind of learning its shapes and the relationship you have with it, it kind of just pops.
Right. Yeah. And just, I'm not saying don't be cautious and don't be wary, but don't be fearful of plants. You know, they are living beings, and they're our friends. You know.
Yeah,
So
but you can get very sick or go on a
Absolutely.
really bad high from a
Absolutely.
psychedelic mushroom or something, that if you're not eating the right, if you're not.
And that's why I'm saying don't. That's why I'm saying don't go in without caution, and don't go out
Right.
and don't go. Just keep on your toes, but don't be fearful of plants. Just have your guide with you, your book, and just use common sense.
Yeah.
You know.
And mushrooms are the number one thing. Always cook before you eat it. And if it's a new mushroom, try a very little bit, very little, and then the next morning and the next day, try more.
And always
let your body react to however it's gonna react.
And always be positive that that's what it is. You know, it's not. It's just common sense. Don't eat something that you don't know.
Yeah.
Schikoy, if you would share the reason or the reasoning behind the name of your business.
Okay. So my father's Native American, and I've always had a real connection to that. And Michael, when we got together, he really loved nature, and I started learning more and more about my heritage. And when my father was young, he knows he's Native American, but in school, when he put it down, they told him, no, you're not allowed to be that. You can't be Native American. So I think from that day, they kind of took his identity. So recently, I feel that we've been teaching him more about our heritage, and there's more awareness of it now, more acceptance. I mean, it wasn't until 1978 until the American Indian Religious Freedom Act came into play, where we could be Native American, where we could talk openly about our spirituality and what our meaning of life was. And it is what people are trying to connect to now, is just respect for nature. So the sacred circle is the whole sacred circle of life. It's the meaning behind our being. We're all interconnected, and it always comes in a circle. It's reciprocal.
That's a big thing for us, is reciprocity. So when we're out foraging, for example, we never, when we spot a patch of whatever, we don't take everything, because we know we're not going to use everything, and we always try to give something back. So, for example, in winter we use firewood. That's, to us, that's the most sustainable form of heat. But
we always plant trees.
Our business is we plant trees all the time. So for us, that's an act of reciprocity. The trees are giving us all the energy that they have used for some cases hundreds of years. And the least we can do is try to give back to that, give back for that. So that kind of, for us, that represents the whole sacred circle of life. Mm-hmm. It's not really, some people might look at it with a religious connotation because the word's sacred, but for us, it's just we hold it sacred in our hearts.
And we all wore feathers and shells, and I think that we need to reconnect to our roots, whether it's drumming or dancing or
foraging
for
example,
or just going out into nature and being there and listening. I think that's really important to our health and to our well-being as a society, because if we don't, we're really missing out on what we're losing. So I think we just really need to reconnect again and not lose our environment, because that's what takes care of us.
Absolutely. Tell me about your thoughts about Indigenous wisdom that you shared with me the other day. I think this is absolutely beautiful.
I'll go if you want.
Yeah.
Either one of you.
So we were really inspired by a gentleman named John Trudell. He was a Native American activist back in the 70s with the American Indian movement. And one thing he really said really stuck with us is, Schikoy just kind of paraphrased it earlier, we all wore shells and feathers at some point. We all come from that. So whether it's 2,000 years ago or 12,000 years ago, or even further, or any time in between, we are all indigenous to some area at some point. And we all had, every one of our ancestors had a connection to the earth, to the land, to the foods that came from the land, wild foods.
and we have the intuition embedded in us. There's something that you can touch that can really open up. And whether you're out in the woods and you see a tree and you don't really know what it is, but you spend a little time with it and it kind of tells you what it is. It doesn't need to say, hi, I'm a spruce in those terms, but it tells you, you know, I'm a being, I'm alive, and everything is alive.
Right, and that's kind of going back to what I said earlier with eating more wild foods. You got that bacterial relationship with the bacteria, the wild bacteria in the world and the bacteria in your gut. That's a relationship that has been repeated through generations. You know, our ancestors, that's a relationship that our ancestors had with the bacterial ancestors. So that's a repetitive action that really is crucial to connecting with nature. It's something in our DNA knows that. So like, for example, or even just say you're out in the woods or you're in the garden and you're doing something with the earth, and you get this feeling of
I've been here before.
I've been here
I know
before.
this feeling.
Yeah, and maybe that isn't you that's speaking. That maybe you haven't been to that place. Maybe you haven't done that activity before.
Somebody in your roots has.
Yeah, so sometimes that's actually what they call I can't remember the term right now, but it's like genetic remembrance.
Mm-hmm.
Like we all have these genes in us, in our DNA, that tell us to do one thing, to tell us to do another thing, or we've adapted a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
But we also have genetic memory. So these
it's
are
proven too.
Yeah.
We're not just crazy talking about it. It's really proven.
Yeah, so I mean, I think it's absolutely crucial. I mean, and I'm not like, you know, dissing technology or anything, because we
utilize it to.
We're communicating right now through technology.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But I think it's imperative that we keep the connection that we have to nature, because if we become totally disconnected,
we lose ourselves. In the shortest way to say it, we really do lose ourselves, because there's no way that we can live without oxygen from trees. There's no way that we can live without food that's grown from soil or water. If we keep polluting our waters and our soils and our air, we're left with nothing.
And I think our indigenous ancestors of every race, form, country, whatever, I think they would all agree that, you know, we can't lose our connection with nature, because that is what sustains us. That is what keeps us alive.
Our meaning on earth is to be stewards of the land, to protect her. And I think we've turned on her. And I don't think that's right anymore. I think we need to turn back.
You got me for a loss of words. That was really, that was beautifully said. If you can sum up in one word what your experience in homesteading has been for you, what would it be?
For me, I'd say beautiful. I think that every corner you turn, there's something beautiful happening, whether it's even the problems of getting stuck. In the end, when you come out of it and you're like, oh, we got out of that, it's beautiful. It's a beautiful feeling. I mean, there's probably a better word I could use, but
for me, I think it's never ending, because I'm just constantly learning. And I think that's so rewarding and humbling. Education, not so much in the formal context, but education in an everyday context, for me, it's just never ending. And I that's something that I love, just constantly learning.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you guys so much for this interview. It was wonderful, and I know that the audience is going to learn a lot from you. So happy holidays to you both.
Happy holidays to you, Gloria. Thanks.
Okay.
Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.